And we are going live in effort not to miss out on the Facebook Live notification. If you can just tune in for a few minutes and give us some patience, we're about to have an interview with Dr. Lance von Stade. And he is, oh, he's almost there. So yeah, in the Pre-Chiro podcast, we're just trying to connect the dots to help you clarify your path a little bit better, to help you get a little bit clearer so that you can perform well in chiropractic school. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. And so just exposing you to the different pathways and ways that students focus in school is what this practice of having dialogue with people that are students that are currently in professional practice, that's what it's all about. So while we're waiting for Dr. Lance, I'm just going to read a couple of different things that I think are important for you as a pre-chiropractic student to expose yourself to consider, to think about. So one is just the science of healing. Let me get into that. All right. Dr. Lance is here. All right, cool. Lance, what's going on, my friend?
Cruising. Good morning.
Good morning. You ready to do this? I had to hit record just so that we prevented missing out on the ability to record this live. So why don't we just get started by you just introducing yourself, letting us know your background, what you were up to before chiropractic school, and what attracted you to this profession.
Yeah, I was an athletic trainer before chiropractic, and was teaching high school sports medicine down in Edison High School, Huntington Beach, and worked for the USA water polo team. Loved every minute of it. It was stressful, a lot of hours, but it was my passion, and getting to work with the best of the best and help them get a little bit better just filled my cup. And I was an athlete who had been injured, and that's how I got into sports medicine. And eventually kind of tapped out in that profession, burned out a bit, but also knew I needed more education. I had a mentor who was like, you have to go to chiropractic school. So that was one hand held that took me in that direction. But I had also seen the chiropractic adjustments serve the sports medicine profession right in Rome for the World Championships in 2009. It was my first time as a professional being at the big stage, and I felt a lot of pressure to help our athletes be the best they could be the night before the gold medal match for the water polo World Championships. We had an athlete who had this issue in her back right here. Every time she lifted her arm, it hurt. She couldn't pick up her hand, and in water polo, it's a pretty big deal. Couldn't take big breaths because it was painful. So now thinking, oh, it sounds like a rib. But as an athletic trainer, I wasn't educated on that. So I did 4 hours of therapies and taping and Graston and soft tissue and PNF and stretching and everything I was trained to do. And it wasn't until I ran out of my Batman tool belt that I had to go knock on the door of the chiropractor down the hall, because he was the head coach of the men's water polo team, Dr. Terry Schroeder. And it was like 11 o'clock at night. He comes out in this big robe and he's like, it hurts when she breathes. Lay on the floor, and in the hallway of the hotel, he sets her rib with an adjustment, and immediately she had some relief and could lift her arm and breathe. And it was a bit embarrassing, but I was also grateful. And the next day she scored 2 goals and we won the world championship gold medal. So that was another okay, there's something going on with this chiropractic thing that I obviously can't do as an athletic trainer currently. So that I didn't like seeing a fat hole in my game. And that small impulse in that moment changed her life, my life. And then I also had received my first adjustment on the sand. I was on the sports medicine team of the AVP, which is Association of Volleyball Professionals, beach volleyball professional circuit. And there was a chiropractor on the staff. And he gave me a thoracic adjustment and over the knee move that gave me sensations in my body I'd never experienced. I would say now in hindsight, it was an emotional experience, but I didn't realize that was what was happening at the time. It was just a completely new space within me that had been created that allowed me to breathe differently, feel differently, and never forget that moment. And I think those were the 3 most influential forces that took me into chiropractic as a profession.
Hmm. And I remember when you arrived at chiropractic school, I remember when I initially connected with you, you had mentioned that you had previously been an athletic trainer and that had helped you really just prepare your mind to perform well as a student of chiropractic, whether it was the
Mhm.
adjusting or whether it was just the biomechanics. Um, can you talk about how being an athletic trainer previous to chiropractic school could potentially set you up to transition more efficiently into the program?
Yeah. So as an athletic trainer, I think, get educated very similarly to a physical therapist. And so I was familiar with therapeutic exercise. We don't go as deep as PTs do. Obviously, they put a lot more years and clinical work into it. But from a scope of practice, we get exposed to a lot from an anatomy and biomechanics and exercise perspective. I was fortunate because my mentor and the head athletic trainer at Long Beach State was also a physical therapist. So I think that probably influenced our education and especially our clinical application. When I came into chiropractic school, because I knew the foundations, that was my first language coming in. I got to dive so much deeper into the anatomy. It wasn't my first time seeing all the Latin or understanding the biomechanics and their relationship. I had already been studying the kinetic chain for 5 or 6 years before I got to chiropractic school. So when people started talking about anatomy trains, a book that's not included in the curriculum, but it might be thrown in, I have extra bandwidth to be able to chase down that resource and obsess about the sidebars because the main content I've already heard in the past. So the deepening, I think, was an acceleration.
Mhm.
And also, I think the most influential or the most important bandwidth I had was that I could study the chiropractic adjustment, because that was the application, that was the tool that I actually wanted out of the whole experience. And that's part of why I ended up in the group that I ended up with, training the way that I trained, was uh, I could already tape and massage and adjust and I'm not adjust, do therapeutic exercise. And I knew the anatomy and the biomechanics to a certain extent. Like, I wanted to find the people who were training the adjustment. I had heard at some point, like, that some chiropractors thought they could cure cancer with the adjustment. And I remember being like, that sounds absolutely insane. Uh, at the same time, if they think that's possible, I want to see how they train that. I want to see, like, what are they doing? What's different? There's obviously something I'm not understanding, but if people are taking it that seriously, that's the people I want to be around.
Mhm.
And that guided my decision as well. And I wouldn't have had that extra bandwidth if I was studying anatomy for the first time, because you got 7 anatomy classes back to back in the first 2 years. But
Mhm.
the fact that I had that little bit of comfort with those subjects allowed me to lean even more heavily into the subjects that I think often get swept under the rug because they're the easier classes,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting to think about what your mindset was when you were deciding on which school to go to, because you had that background, yet the school you chose, which was only 30 minutes from a different school that outwardly promotes a sports program, involvement in on the sidelines at different team
Mhm.
activities. You chose to go to a different school from that. Can you talk about your decision process? Was it purely location? Or what were some of your mentors influencing you to go a different direction? And I'd like you to follow that up with just talking about when you arrived on campus, there was a certain confidence. You also had some side projects, some entrepreneurial ventures that you were
Mhm.
involved in already. Can you just touch on how that helped you through school to stay connected to what you were doing outside of the program?
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, man. Um, yeah. So location was big for me because there was a girl that I was really excited to be close to. My now wife, she was living in Berkeley, and Life West and Palmer were the 2 Bay Area schools. And therefore, they were the only 2 schools that I toured because I knew I wanted to be close to her. But when it came to deciding between Life West and Palmer West, I toured both schools, and I remember seeing the sports council, and the people who were giving me the tour heard, "Oh, you're an athletic trainer. Well, we have the sports council. So that's a no-brainer for you." I remember that being a big turnoff because I'm like, I had a mentor in athletic training who said, if you get your bachelor's in athletic training, you got to get your master's in something else to diversify. You don't want to just be the specialist, because we need more people who have expertise in different factors. And so because their pitch to me was so heavy on sports only, and I had just been the athletic trainer for the world championship gold medal. I mean, I was a cocky ass 24-year-old or 25-year-old. I was like, I'm like top of the game. Why would I want more sports at the chiropractic level? Like, just give me the adjustment. That's all I really need to become a better athletic trainer. And so Life West, the whole pitch was about the philosophy of chiropractic, which sounded different to me. It was about adjusting. You get 13 different technique classes, which kind of means you don't become a master in any of them because you don't spend enough time with one of them. Luckily, we built programs and things that allowed the training to progress in one. And so Monica influenced it. Not wanting to do more of the same in sports influenced it, and then having the offer to do a wide variety of techniques and applications of the adjustment, which was really the tool I was looking for. Those influenced it bigly. When it came to the entrepreneurial stuff and the side stuff, it also the confidence, which I think at the time was very egoic. I thought I was better than I probably was, and thought I had to give my gift to the world. And so I started a nonprofit called Athletes on Purpose. And I said nonprofit. I never actually formed the legal structure of nonprofit. We just never made a profit. We would have given it away if we made it. But I was connected through the volleyball world. I was also the athletic trainer for the boys national team for the Pan Am Cup in 2010. And so I got connected in with Stanford and a couple other organizations and started a program for high school kids where we were delivering like a purpose-driven life through high-level performance training. And so we would build world-class performance training, the same stuff I was doing for the Olympic team, but for high school club volleyball athletes. And even though they would show up to get a better vertical, we were trying to help them find and develop what their mission, their vision, and their core values were. And so having that project outside of class continuously gave me a place I could apply the lessons. So as I was learning the chiropractic philosophy, I would go down 4 times a week and teach that philosophy to these athletes and these coaches. And it just kept me on purpose. And when it came to any business classes or entrepreneurship classes, I was in the class building the business. And although eventually the commute got so bad because Silicon Valley just blew up during 2011 to 2016, it was no longer sustainable for me to be able to make it down there. And Monica and I settled our life in San Francisco. So I've allowed that business to at least be on pause. It was such an amazing lesson and group of lessons and failures, to be frank, that when I acquired Golden Gate Chiropractic and basically started again from scratch, from a branding, from a mission, from a vision, from hiring, it wasn't my first go around. And I had invested any extra student loan money into building Athletes on Purpose, which still sits in all the Google Drive folders and could be reactivated. Maybe it will once my kids are old enough to participate in sports. But even if it doesn't, that was tuition I paid for business school for lessons I would not have otherwise learned until the stakes were so high that I don't know if I could have recovered.
And that's so crucial to point out. One of the aims of Pre-Chiro is to encourage a prospective student to engage in entrepreneurial activities. They don't have to run their own business. It is recommended, but even just getting involved with a project that is creative, that is looking to reach more people or help more people, it's really, and also involves branding and communication and contextualizing a topic in a way that's familiar for people, but brings them into your world just a little bit. That's, I believe, the secret sauce of starting your own chiropractic practice, being able to relate to your community. Can you talk about some of the activities and influences that you got involved with early on in school that helped you really feel like you were in the right place in the first year of school, that really just put you on the right path?
Yeah. You were one of my influences when I was in school. You were one of the people at first quarter who came up to me and told me about MLS. And I think that was my introduction to a style of adjusting and serving people that I'm so grateful for. It's still one of my foundational experiences. Going into chiropractic school, I mentioned I wanted to be a better athletic trainer. And so I wanted to learn the adjustment because that was the thing that I couldn't do as an athletic trainer. So I seeked out ways to get better at adjusting. I also knew that I wanted to speak internationally because as the athletic trainer for the US team, I got to travel to 15, 16 different countries to compete, but also we would do workshops, we would do local events. I got to speak, and I just like, if I could do this for a living, that'd be amazing. So I looked for ways to increase my communication style as well as my international networking. And so the World Congress of Chiropractic Students was a no-brainer when I found that organization. And then my experience at water polo ended abruptly because I had not developed myself from a character perspective. And so I had my college party mentality that basically got me fired from the water polo job because I got drunk after the world championships. And there was this switch in my brain that had to get flipped. I had developed myself so much professionally, but did not develop myself as an individual. And I was still behaving when I partied like I was in high school or college, even though now I was professionally at the top of my game. And that gap was so significant that I knew I had to do something to close that gap. One of those things was start athletes on purpose. So athletes don't continue to progress in their careers, but not actually develop themselves as individuals. And I had seen other athletes who had retired from a world championship status or Olympic silver medal, and then the next year be depressed and on drugs. It's like, what? There's this cliff that I had felt, this cliff that I had seen, and so I tried to build that program. And so then nonviolent communication came into my life, and that was probably the most influential, from healing the wounds of my past, finding and connecting with myself, and has, I think, influenced my adjusting, my service and practice, my ability to be a boss and a manager across the board because of my communication. So I would say that MLS, from quarter one, training that, like head, heart, and hands, connecting with people on the table and serving them over everything else, and that training mentality. We ended up starting a program called Adjusting Ninjas, which became Kairos Training Culture, which is also training from a performance training standpoint, the chiropractic adjustment and what it takes to have the chiropractic body and the mind and the spirit to move into that, training that nonstop and connecting with a large tribe of people who are on that same path of serving their communities. The World Congress of Chiropractic Students, which is just what it sounds like, is the world network of chiropractic students trying to make change within the profession and serve their local communities as well, building network with each other so they can have global opportunities, building their leadership and integrity standpoints within the professional standards so that there are professions continuing to evolve, but not just within each country, but across the board. And then nonviolent communication, which you can look up, A Language of Life. It's a book by Marshall Rosenberg. And I think when we learn how to speak with ourselves with respect and presence and have that consciousness when we're with other people, we are a value add to every situation. And we can heal our traumas. We can use language that's in tune with the ways we want to see the world and the way we want to show up. And if those three things, I could just package up and give to someone. It's what I hope my children can pick up and run with. The path of training and mastery, a broad, diverse exposure to people from different cultures, and nonviolent communication, or a needs-based consciousness.
Beautifully put. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you touching on these different things because we're really trying to connect the dots so that students can get exposure early on to KTC or early on to nonviolent communication or even WCCS, and find ways to connect with it and also just explore it. There's so much online now that's available. If we can just organize this information, then prospective students will be able to arrive on day one with a higher probability of success, a higher probability of satisfaction with that student experience. And that's what it's all about. You know, I've been talking about this project for a really long time now. I remember being on the phone with you around 5:30 in the morning when I had just graduated. You were at the end of school, and we were talking about hygienic movement and how can we influence population management. How can we influence people when they're at the movies, when they're at sporting events, when they're sitting in the classroom, when they're in the car, to get conscious and get in their body and start to move more. And I think that the chiropractic and all that might not be as much the emphasis on movement as much as it is the adaptation to the environment and creating what you've created. I think you look at the environment, you look for what those problematic little gaps are in people's behavior or mindset, and you try and fill that with these structured programs that you've created. So I just want to thank you for being visionary. And can you touch on your creative process and how you begin to think like a visionary, like someone who's here to think beyond the current narrative?
Yeah, well, thank you, because our conversations throughout my school experience were inspiring, and I think you are part of the force that helped me feel like vision is okay. I hadn't met too many other visionaries when I was young, and to meet you and to see now like the manifestation of these things that you have been working on for a long time. I mean, Chiro movement, movement hygiene, pre-Chiro, these are things that you would throw out, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm getting notifications. Oh, these things are growing. So thanks, Ben. My visionary process comes from being around other people who are open to possibility. It comes from having a system of being able to track over time. So it's not just ideas that come in and out, but I move, I breathe, I meditate every day. And if I have a thought, I never let it slide. I never let it float away. I track it. So I have an inbox. I do getting things done. So my inbox is all over the place. I have pieces of paper. I have electronic devices. I have all these things, but everything gets tracked into one inbox by the end of the day. So that's the most important thing for anything, because the thoughts come. If you create spaces where you can have new insights and new ideas, you just have to have a place where you're collecting them. And then it might not be that moment when it's relevant, but the thought was there. That's the seed that gets planted. And if you continue to live the life that you're living, if that becomes a possibility where it could have legs or take off, you just have to have a place where you're like, wait, didn't I have this idea? You go back and see it. And now the opportunity is validated from the moment you had the idea. And that second time that you think about it, that's when it grows. So if something happens once, it's probably never going to happen again. But if it happens twice, now you have a pattern. And if you establish a pattern with an idea, now you're bringing it into the physical world. You're starting to show that it has relevance. And now you get to choose, because once you get that skill set of seeing opportunity, there's too many ideas than you could actualize in one lifetime. So you can start to give ideas away and delegate them to others. You can build teams that have broad skill sets and start to build multiple things at the same time and see which one is going to take off the quickest, or which one gets your needs met the fastest. Maybe it's a need for contribution. Maybe it's a need for revenue and income. Maybe it's a need for exploration and adventure. So there's different opportunities that you can have. But I think once you establish a practice that creates a space for you to have new thoughts and ideas, I recommend moving and breathing and meditating, because the movement clears the physical body out of the way. The breath work alters your state of consciousness, so you can kind of be in this floaty realm where you can have new ideas and think a little differently. And then the meditation presence, that clears the space out mentally, so you can really become subtly perceptive to what's happening inside. Then having some type of system that takes it from idea, thought into physical world. And for me, I like getting things done. It's just a very straightforward, it's not perfect, but it's a nice system that can start to establish a habit of organization and efficiency. And then I think building teams, starting to have really good communication strategies, following in, following up, and following through, which are just 3 steps for me when it comes to working with a team. Following in means listening actively and really understanding what's going on with them. Following up is making sure that if we say we're going to do something, we follow up and make sure it's happening. And then following through is getting it done, making promises and following through on them.
Thank you for that. And I also want to acknowledge and honor your contribution to my path and my experience, seeing you doing the Athletes on Purpose as a student, developing protocols and going outside of the program. You know, the program's very vigorous, and you were taking extra time to go and still work with the real world, stay connected to the population of people that you wanted to one day serve. And I look at that as being an essential piece to you getting out of chiropractic school, still relatable, still able to communicate effectively. And you also introduced me to foundation training, which I've been practicing now for about 7, 8 years, almost every day. And I love it. And you developed a program with Dr. Eric Goodman and foundation training. Can you just touch on what the inspiration behind that program was and what it offers to chiropractic students?
Yeah, foundation training is basically a system of breathing and movement that integrates the breathing so that the entire body's connecting through its muscle chains rather than individual units of muscles. And for me, the inspiration came from when I was an athletic trainer. I met Dr. Eric Goodman. We worked together at the US Open of Surfing. I think it was 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And I was, again, like elbows into soft tissue and sweating and working with people for a half an hour, 45 minutes. And I looked over and this guy's barely touching them, simply cueing them in movements. And the line of people to see him was, 30 deep. I had 2 people waiting, and his results were great. People were stoked. So I was like, okay, what's this guy got going on? Went up and met him. Ended up taking his first seminar he ever did. It wasn't called foundation training at the time. It was called Foundation Roots. And ironically, I was in San Francisco, so now I was in that space. And I continued to just be in the sphere with him, listening and participating, kind of feeling collaborative in a way. And then I ended up with a pretty severe injury. My second quarter in school, I went to China because the Olympics were that year in 2012. I was the performance coach for the Olympic judo team in China, and took a quarter off of chiropractic school and then came back. And it was an intense period of time. There was a lot of stress. Obviously, grad school is already stressful, but now I just had to go through this rigorous onboarding and then got let go of that team because of budgeting reasons over in Beijing, and sent back. And school, new relationship, and Athletes on Purpose was still going. And so I was just so tight and trying to get it all done. Monica had moved to Turlock, 2 hours east. And so I was commuting 12 hours in the car every week from Sunnyvale, where Athletes on Purpose was, out to Turlock, Modesto in the Central Valley to be with her on the weekends and throughout the week, and then back to Life West and Hayward and back and forth. And eventually I had started to get pain in my low back that progressed into radiculopathy into my leg and my hamstring, then into my calf, then into my foot. And eventually I was walking through chiropractic college without being able to put my heel on the ground, with electric shock going in. I was getting adjusted. Eventually they put a red dot on my file in the clinic, which means no docs can adjust me. No students can adjust me. And 3 in a row that I saw referred me to a neurosurgeon. And luckily, this was 6 months of pain. The neurosurgeon saw my MRI. There was a herniated disc, free-floating fragment, L5S1. But he said it wasn't the worst he'd ever seen. And he said, your white blood cells might be able to resorb that. Let's give it a little time. And so also, fortunately, the quarter had ended for school. So I got a week off. I took a week off of Athletes on Purpose because I always organized that break with the students, the high school students' spring break. And Monica and I went down to Southern California. And this is where I really picked up foundation training. And because no chiropractors would adjust me, but it wasn't an emergency, according to the neurosurgeon, I knew there was something I could do. And so I just started doing decompression breathing, started hip hinging really subtly. We drove for an hour down towards SoCal, but I couldn't drive longer than an hour because of the pain. We'd pull over and stop. I would just do that movement, that breath work, and that meditation for about an hour, and then get back in the car and then drive another hour. And then we'd stop off. I'd take a break and just do foundation training all the way down. After 5 or 6 stops, we got down, and for the first time in months, the pain went from my foot back into my calf. And that was encouraging. So the next day, we were in Huntington Beach. I went down to the dog beach and did it again all day. And by the end of the day, I was out of my calf into my hamstring. And this hadn't happened in months. By day 3, the pain went from my hamstring to my glute. Day 4 into my back. And day 5, I was pain-free. And I didn't believe it. I had to test it to make sure it was true. And so I handed my camera to a buddy and said, hey, just hold the button. I'm going to do a backflip. did a backflip, no pain. I have the images. I started crying. I was so excited. I had no idea why this had worked so effectively. Uh, and then that was also another force that motivated me when I was in school to to learn what is not being taught. And so I started looking into this and realizing, like, how did this has to happen to other people. But I had never heard that the body could heal so fast. I had heard that the body can heal itself, but without actually having anyone else touch me, I was able to just breathe and move differently and basically take the tension off of my spinal cord and reposition my body. When I looked into it, I found an article from 2007 by Susan Holm and Kevin Rose that talked about 40 to 50% of chiropractors actually get injured in the first 5 years of practice. And once I saw that, I felt compelled to help other chiropractors prevent injuries, because if almost half of our profession is getting injured in practice, if that was my athletes in training, the methods that were being used to train are faulty. They're not learning injury prevention embedded into their sport or embedded into their practice, which is a physical practice in chiropractic.
Mm-hmm.
And even just a quick sidebar, as soon as I got hired as the head athletic trainer and strength coach of USA Water Polo, the previous year, one of our athletes could not compete in the Olympics because she tore her rotator cuff doing clean and jerk a week before the Olympics. Tore her rotator cuff and she was out. So I was really sensitive to training that was being done that was at too high of a risk for it to pay off in a performance way. And so when I started training chiropractic again, I took biomechanics so intense that I basically embedded the foundation training principles of anchoring, decompressing into the chiropractic training. And that's where Kairos training culture, at least my contribution to it, became very relevant. And I feel like I had obsessed about the mechanics of the chiropractic adjustment. Mm-hmm. And also now we teach foundation training principles to all of our patients. I send videos every day to friends and family and loved ones. I just think it's brilliant and simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know you got to go. I just want to wrap up by letting you know that there was a moment in school when you got adjusted by me, and you had shared with me that that was one of the better adjustments you had ever had. And as a student who was trying so hard to get good at adjusting and refine my adjustment, and just spending every weekend in seminars, spending every day on the side rooms, just drilling, practicing, and having a story where I would often share who was my favorite adjustment, or one of the adjustments that was really memorable to me. That was really a confident booster to me at that moment in school. And I just wish that every chiropractic student would be able to hear somebody let them know, hey, you're doing something special, keep it up, keep moving forward. So I want to thank you for the feedback you gave me, regardless of the ego that it satisfied. It was definitely something that stuck with me and reassured me that, hey, I'm at a professional level of skill set, and that, you know, I can deliver the goods no matter who's on my table. So
well, I'll even say real quick, because now at this point I have been adjusted thousands of times, and and I remember exactly that adjustment. It was right atlas, and I remember it being so comfortable and quick, and the way that I felt walking out of the room felt like I felt warm and comfortable, and the way that I touched, like when I went to touch myself, I felt so much more sensitive, but I felt like I could feel myself more effectively and also receive the feeling of being felt more effective. Mm-hmm. It was a paradigm shift for me, because it was the first time I think that I had received an adjustment that changed the way that I felt. Not just made me feel better, but I got better at feeling in that moment from that impulse. So thank you, because that was an eye opener.
Right. And I imagine the people that come to your seminars are able to experience a level of subtlety that they can't really get in their adjusting lab at school. And that, I think, is what I was able to help show you, or help you experience in that moment, was like, hey, if you come and you keep training and you dedicate yourself on the weekends and on the side room, you know, keep going, you're going to get to this level of subtlety that you really haven't experienced even from professionals. That's what was shared with me in MLS. And, you know, I was an MLS junkie in school. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you got to run, but I appreciate you. And if there's any way that I can connect students with you, I will in the future.
Cool.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank you,
man.
my brother.
My pleasure, dude. Talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good, bro.
Peace.
Peace.